being a Jehovah's Witness is unhealthy and are scary things that could literally make you lose your life. The blood doctrine could make you lose your life. You know, children are being, that is not being taken care of. We didn't even get into the fact that my father, there's just so much going on in the Jehovah's Witness organization. This isn't about a religion. This is about a dangerous cult, and they're actively trying to get people to join it. So that I feel needs light brought to it. It was just digging into jw.org that made me like, start finding
That's enough.
things and yeah, and seeing contradictions and just and it all on my own. And then finally, I like sort of my son and I had a conversation after a meeting on a Tuesday night. He went with me, and I said to him, like, "Oh, wasn't it nice to see everybody?" I was trying to get him excited about maybe coming back, which I knew down deep he wasn't gonna. And he was like, "Mom," he's in his mid 20s at this point. He says, "Mom," he's like, "they're not really my friends." And he's like, "And are they really your friends?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, Since we stopped going to the meetings," he's like, "you never got to lunch with anybody. You," he says, "you never do anything with anybody unless it's a spiritual thing." He goes, "And even then, you seem miserable. You don't seem happy. No one asks you to come over to their house for dinner. No one asks you to do anything because we're so spiritually scary because we left." And he's like, "Shouldn't they be building you up?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's right." And it was true. Nobody, like, I would text people and say, "Hey, do you want to get coffee?" Everyone always had an excuse on why they couldn't. Nobody from the Kingdom Hall was doing anything with me anymore. And I just thought, yeah, this is not how this is supposed to be, which then led me to reading the whole Bible because I realized, though I had probably read the whole Bible in the many years I had been a witness, through the Bible reading and all that, I had never sat down and just read the Bible from cover to cover for my own benefit. And so I thought I really want to know what does the Bible say, and without the Jehovah's Witness narrative, the Watchtower narrative in my head. And so
Right.
that's what I did. I sat down and read the Bible cover to cover. That's also what made me an agnostic. Not gonna lie, but um, I I I know the Bible better than I ever did before. I realized the Jehovah's Witnesses are teaching it completely wrong. Like they do not have any of the teachings correct. And but it also made me aware that I love the parts about Jesus. I think that they are beautiful, but there's a lot about the Bible I don't enjoy and agree with. So, and I'll just leave it at that because I'm not here to preach to people who to be or what to be. I think everyone needs to be what they want to be. That's why my
Yeah,
tagline is "Be yourself and be well."
that's cool. I know Fallon and I, obviously, from just our descriptions here on the screen, we have very different views, but our priority is, and I think you have the same. It's like, oh, just whatever one takes you out of the cult.
I was gonna say, and that's why I don't preach about you need to be like me or have my thoughts because these are just what work for me and make me a healthy person and make me happy and work for my life. But and as long and being a Jehovah's Witness is unhealthy and they are scary things that could literally make you lose your life. The blood doctrine could make you lose your life. You know, children are being, there is that is not being taken care of. We didn't even get into the fact that my father-in-law is, there's just so much going on in the Jehovah's Witness organization. This isn't about a religion. This is about a dangerous cult. And so, and they're actively trying to get people to join it. So that I feel needs light brought to it. I have nothing against people choosing, a a religion that makes them happy and is a healthy thing for them. That's for them to figure out for them, or to not have religion in your life. That's perfectly good too. I don't think it's my place to ever be a Jehovah's Witness again, going around preaching and telling people who they need to be.
Well, it sounds like your family did an amazing job of being supportive without pushing you back into it. How would you, like, if you were giving advice to somebody who was, there's certainly people here who are physically out, mentally out, and they still have immediate family who are in. How would you advise? Everybody's different. How would you advise them to treat that, or what kind of things would be helpful for them? Because obviously persecuting them for going is not going to work. But you also don't necessarily want to drive them there and tell them it's a good idea. What do you think?
Right.
I think that number one, don't think you are going to, get someone to wake up. They have to do that on their own. Waking someone up is not, waking someone else up, I don't think personally works. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just what I
Yeah.
found. I think people wake up on their own when they're ready. Um, and I was already on the path to waking up, obviously, from everything I told you. I just wasn't quite ready when my family was. I needed a little more time. And I think that giving people their space, um, don't push information on them before they're ready. Um, Giving them little tidbits where you are able to, but then back off. Like just give little hints and then step back again. Just little enough for them to think, and don't also, and I would also say ask them questions more than tell them how it is. Don't say Jehovah's Witnesses do this or that. Say, do you think Jehovah's Witnesses do this? You know, why do you think Jehovah's Witnesses do this or that? Um, you know, uh, have you ever heard of Jehovah's Witnesses doing this? Have you ever heard of a case where this happened with Jehovah's Witnesses? Always try to put it in a question form so that you're not giving them the information, you're making them think about it. And they might even just immediately say to you, that never happens. And you can say, are you sure? That's not what I've found, but you know what? You do your own research.
Right.
Say things like that that makes them have to realize, what do you mean do research? That's that, and they're going to think that's that apostate thing. But it's going to get in there. It's going to be that little thing that gets in
The
there that
seed
maybe
is
makes them,
planted. Yeah.
yeah, that makes them like, okay, wait a minute. Why are they saying that? I think those are the more important ways of going about it. And then with my family, sticking to what they really said. They told me they were going to support me with whatever I chose to do. My son told me he would sometimes go with me to the meeting, and he really did do that. But he told me, I will go to the meeting with you, but I am going there only for you. I am not
Right.
interested in it. I do not agree with it. I don't think it's healthy. But if you need the mental and emotional support, especially because you are getting sober, I will go with you from time to time. And that is the only reason I'm going, is to support you in your sobriety. So he made it clear why he was going, and he stuck to it. He would go when I had really nights where I was feeling very emotional, feeling really upset. I would say, please, can you just come with me tonight? I just can't sit there by myself. He would do it. And I knew he hated it, but he did it for me. And that said so much to me, to know he was sitting there hating it, but doing it for me. That said a lot to me. That really, really said a lot to me because, and then when, and then he would talk to everyone, be kind to everyone. And I knew it was driving him nuts to be there and all these people being so fake nice trying to get him to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just so sweet through it all. And he's a very outgoing kid and very loved by many. So I know it was a lot for him to do, but he did it for me. So staying true to your word, if you say something to a believing family member that like, I will, whatever you choose, I will be by your side with this or that. Stick to your word. Don't say something and then do another thing. Um, I think those are the important things. Ask, like I said, ask a lot of questions that make them like probe them, make them think, and just continue being loving. Always do things out of love and kindness and not allow your anger and hate to be what's leading you to do stuff, because in the end, that's what's leading the the Jehovah's Witness organization, not the people necessarily, but the driving force behind the governing body is greed and anger and just them wanting stuff for themselves. And you don't want to come across as you want this for you. You need to want it for them. So it should be done with love.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I love that your family just behaved like a family, like how an actual family should work.
Yeah.
They gave you their word and they stuck to it, regardless of the influence of the organization, good or bad. They were there for you, and that's what a family's supposed to do. So I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Jared and I did a video, not too, I think back in the spring, that was titled something like "Can You Wake Your Family Member Up?" And we tell the longer version of me and him in my waking up process. Like we sort of go through it very regimentedly of how everything exactly happened. And it might be interesting for somebody who is trying to deal with a family member that they desperately would like them to wake up. And it talks in detail about what my family did with me.
We'll put that video in the description, and then we'll link it right here at this time marker too. So thank you very much. I appreciate
Okay.
you sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
What? So you said that the first time that you went to rehab, you said you were sober for 2 years, and that it didn't really stick for you. What do you think happened there? Or do you mind sharing that?
No, I didn't want to be sober. It's the long and the short of it. I didn't want to be sober. I didn't want to be sober when I went. I knew I needed to be sober. I will say that I felt healthier sober, and I knew that it was good for me. But I had never dealt with any of the issues as to why I was drinking in the first place. And that is, you have to understand why you are drinking. You need to understand the why of of the drinking problem in order to get to a place of real recovery. So I was a dry drunk, which is a term that's often used in AA or in the rehab world. And what I mean is I wanted to be drunk every day, even though I was dry, even though I wasn't drinking and I was technically sober. But in my brain, I wasn't really sober. I was thinking about drinking all the time. And that's why I had to desperately stay away from it too. I couldn't be around anyone drinking. I couldn't be around it at all. I couldn't go to a restaurant with alcohol. Like I only went to diners. I only went to fast food. I I went to an AA meeting constantly. And AA is a great resource. I don't do AA any longer. It is not the right program for me, but if it's a good program for you, it is a great program. It just didn't work for me. But I it didn't work because I hadn't got to the why of why I was drinking. And again, when I quit drinking the first time, I was still an active Jehovah's Witness who was not facing the cognitive dissonance all the way. I hadn't got to the point of therapy. I had got diagnosed as bipolar, but I had not really opened up in therapy and talked about my childhood, about, how much the Jehovah's Witness stuff messed with my childhood. Um, the fact that I got married so young, had kids right away, that I never got to figure out who I was. I just was, I put on the new personality and became a Jehovah's Witness mom and wife and pioneer and all those things. And I never knew who Deanna was. I was just what everyone else expected me to be. And, so I was drinking. And, people always say things like, well, I've always drank, or I drink because I'm bored or because I'm stressed. But there's so much more to it than that, like why, you know, why are you bored? Are you bored because you feel neglected in a relationship? Like there's always an underlying question there. It's not just you're bored. Um, you know, if you've always drank, did you start drinking as a teenager? What was triggering you as a teenager to want to turn to alcohol? Like, there's so many further questions, and that's where a therapist comes into play. That's the only reason I know any of what I'm saying right now is because I've gone to intensive therapy. And
Right.
I've started going to a really good therapist. I switched up therapists. I started going to a really good therapist even before I got sober. And she kept saying to me, "You need to go to rehab. You need to go to rehab. You need to go." Like every session, she's like, "You need to go to rehab." So I was getting to the point where I was trying to get sober on my own, and I knew I needed to get sober, but I was like afraid. And but I was starting to get to the reasons of why finally. Why was I drinking? Like that was finally coming to the forefront in therapy. And it came to a final day where I had just gone through therapy. I had gotten to the point where I had not drank for almost 10 days. I had gotten through 10 days of being sober on my own. And I got into a huge fight um, with my mom on the phone. And then I decided to go shopping, do some shopping to get myself out of the house and not think about it. And I stopped and got a drink at lunch. And then I decided to have 2 drinks at lunch, which turned into 3 or 4 drinks at lunch. And then I continued shopping, and then I stopped at a bar and had some more drinks. And then I got in a car accident. And fortunately, no one got hurt. I got a DUI, and I'm so thankful I did. Um, no one wants a DUI. It is so much money, and it is so miserable, and don't do it. But I'm so thankful it happened because I had been trying to get myself pulled together. I knew I wanted to get sober at this point. I was down that path of trying to figure out the why of I was drinking. I was getting there, but getting in that car accident, again, just a minor fender bender, fortunately, and nobody got hurt, but it was enough of a thing that I came home, slept off my drinking, woke up and said to my husband, "I have to go to rehab tomorrow. Like, we got to call the place that my therapist has been telling me about, and we got to see if I can get a bed tomorrow." It was very close to my house, and we were able to get me in the next day, and I went to rehab. But this time we were going to rehab. I was going to rehab because I wanted to go, not because I felt guilted, not because it was an ultimatum, not because I was trying to get sober for my family. I wanted to get sober for me. And I was already on the path of figuring out the why of why I had been drinking. And the therapists, I had one main one, but there was several therapists in the rehab. You would do group sessions weekly with every day with, about 5 or 6 other addicts, and some were addicts, some were alcoholics, some were both. Um, and you had a wide variety of personalities there, but overall, really great people. And my therapist was this really young girl, and I remember I totally am gonna admit I walked in and thought, "Oh, what is she gonna teach me? Like, she looks like she's the same age as my kids."
Right.
Like, I totally was prejudiced and just thought, and sort of rolled my eyes. She was amazing, absolutely incredible. I love her, and shout out to Megan if she ever watches this. But she was great, and then you had one-on-one sessions with her weekly, and that's how everyone did it. And the whole facility was amazing, but she was so good and really helped me, and she had heard of Jehovah's Witnesses but didn't know the details. But as she really tried to understand, and I explained so much, and it really helped me in a month get down to the nitty gritty of all of the cognitive dissidence, the childhood trauma, and how much of my childhood trauma played into being a Jehovah's Witness. You know, and we don't have to get into all that, but like, that's what it came down to. And it's so funny. She would show us a movie every week. She would pick a different movie to show us. And the one week it was Pixar's Inside Out, which I had seen before. And I cry every time I watch that movie. But, it's so good. The new one's really good too. So, so
One
she
gets
shows
me.
this movie. I was like, oh, so you want us to cry? Real nice. And she's laughing. And she was like, no, she says, I want all of you to watch this movie. And she says, and you need to remember as you're watching it that all of the emotions are important, all of them. And she said, you can't let one emotion take over because then it's a disaster. And I was like, okay. So then we watched the movie. And then afterwards, she said, so what is everyone's thoughts? And so everyone's giving their thoughts. And then she said, so you notice how when anger and fear took the lead, they just took over and everything fell apart. She's like, and that's what happens when you are an addict. You're using, whether you're drinking or using, because you're allowing anger and fear to take the wheel. And then all those other things are just going to fall to the wayside. And then she even took it further when we had our individual session. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I said to you earlier, about the fact that we're, as witnesses, we always preached, peace, hope, and love. But in actuality, fear, shame, and guilt were what were used, to keep us as witnesses there in the kingdom hall and doing everything. So, we don't want those ugly emotions to be what's the full thing guiding us. Those things are there. They're always going to be there, but that shouldn't be the major force that's driving us. Because when you allow the negative things to be the main force always driving you, then the ugly parts of you, the negative parts of you, the parts of you that don't make good decisions are usually going to be what comes out. And as an addict, that can be death dealing. It's bad for anybody, but as an addict, you're going to really make the worst decisions possible if you allow, the shame, the guilt, the fear, the anger be what's leading you at all times. And so I started learning that I had to reshape how these things were, because it's not like anger is going to fully go away. Am I angry about how the organization is doing things still to this day? Yes. But I can now stop and think, okay, I can just be angry and get nasty and I can drink over it, or I could get in a fight with my mom like I did that day, or I can have a YouTube channel and make people aware and try to, bring down Watchtower one video at a time. That's what I can, do in a healthy way with my anger. So therapy and rehab and all these things can teach you healthy tools, because it's not like your anger is going to go away completely. It can be calmed down, but you can find healthy ways to deal with these things. And again, getting to the why is so important, because once you know why you're angry, you can start figuring out, now, how do I deal with it in a better way? Or sometimes even, can I make peace with this? Can I come to it, confront it, and examine it, and come to a place where I can let it go, especially if it's something from your childhood. Are you able to see it as an adult and understand it in a different way now than you did as a child? I know for me anyways, certain things that me and my dad had, since we've never gotten along. And, I realized how much I was hanging on to some things, and I was very bitterly angry with him for years. And I can truly say now that I love my dad. Um, I give him space to be him, and I do not have anger towards him anymore. And trust me, that's a really big sentence to be saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the phrase. I'm sure you've heard it about turning your mess into a message, and I love to see that part of you, that you're taking the residual anger that you still have, and you're, just using it as fuel to address the root of the issue, to channel it in a way that not only helps you, but like can potentially help so many other people. I think that's amazing. But then the other, as I was listening to you, the other thing that crossed my mind was, in a lot of ways, the process of getting sober makes me think of how it mimics the process of waking up. You said, you have to want to do it for you. You can't do it for somebody else. And I was just thinking about, if you have a friend or a family member that's already woken up or they're already out, there's not really anything specific that they're going to say that's going to push you over the edge as well. You have to want it for yourself. And then, like establishing the why factor. Why are you drinking? The mirror of that, as far as waking up, would be, if you are unhappy, if you're having doubts about certain issues, why am I having those doubts? Is it really because I just lack faith, or is it because there's something disingenuous going on with the teachings of this organization? So I just thought it was interesting, just how those two things kind of mirror each other in a certain way. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
that's yeah, that is. That's very interesting. I think that you're dead on with that. That's exactly how it should be looked at. I'm also glad that I got through certain things that I did, and with getting sober, I have confidence for the first time in my life. Um, Walking away from the organization and getting sober made me stop doubting myself so much and so often, because, like we were saying before, I was always doubting, like, oh, I must have this wrong. Like, I don't have enough faith, and I am not understanding the Bible correctly, and it's all me. It's always a me problem. And it wasn't a me problem. I am intelligent. I mean, not super intelligent, but like I'm not dumb. And I did understand what I was reading. And you know, I look back now and realize, even at family studies as a kid, I would question things to my dad, and he would get mad at me and like reprimand me during the study because I would question a teaching as a kid, as like a 10-year-old, and I would get reprimanded. And so, since I was really little, I was always made to feel like it's you, Deanna. You are questioning something, and if that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be, and you don't have it right. You're the one. You're the problem. So I finally now feel like, no, I don't know everything. I have many things to still learn. Um, there's always room for growth and understanding, but at
Yeah,
the same time, I'm not as stupid as I always thought I was.
you're doing
We've
amazing.
we've talked about it before, and I feel like the organization, and I say this not to be silly, but the organization strikes me very similar as like a gaslighting, abusive boyfriend. Where it has its person cornered, and it makes them feel completely inadequate and undermines them at every opportunity. It's
Yeah.
horrific, and so much of the therapy is about helping get better from that. Let me ask this, if you don't mind. I when Obviously, in our area of the world, there are rehabilitation clinics. There's places you can go, and but some of the people who are listening may not have that option. What would you recommend as like a second best solution, or do you think you can find solution, which is therapy alone, if that is absolutely not an option for them? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, there's a lot of online options. If you can't do inpatient, there are a lot of outpatient programs. Like, say your situation is that you don't have the time, you can't get time off of work, um, but you do have insurance. You can do outpatient programs, which they can range and vary. Some are, like 3 evenings a week. So a therapist and a group of people that are all in similar situation to you. They talk about everything they would talk about in an inpatient program, as far as you learn about, the understanding of the disease of addiction and how it works and why it happens. And they give you all of the scientific understanding of it all, which really does help to know all that when you are an addict, to understand, why is my body doing this? Why is it craving this? Why, all that helps you. And then it gives you, helps you to understand, what can I do to, change different things in my life and all that. So it has all that, but then, you can go to AA. AA is free, and there is AA around the world. There are AA meetings in every country. It is Christian based, but they do welcome agnostics. Like, that is, that you do not have to be, they do. It is based on, you have to have. They want you to believe in a higher power of some sort, but your higher power can be the people in the rooms. Like, so it doesn't have to be a deity if you truly don't believe in any form of God or a deity. So, you can definitely go to AA, which is free and truly in every country of the world. And they're usually in churches, basements of churches. They're in community centers. They're sometimes in hospitals. You can find meetings all over, and you can go online. The other thing is, ever since 2020, there are tons of AA meetings and other secular recovery meetings online that you can just go onto for free. It's a completely secular recovery group, and I used to do those meetings a good bit. They're really, really nice. But therapy alone is, I think, sort of therapy and a group is a good idea, but it's not necessary. Like, for me, what I do at this point is, I go to therapy every week, and then my sort of meetings every week is that I do yoga. That's my form of, you know, I don't know, meetings or AA meetings or whatever you want to call them, because sitting and just talking and talking and talking about my alcoholism, 4 days, they want you to go every day to 4 days a week to meetings, was just not working for me and my brain and how I do things. It's just not how my brain works. That actually drove me nuts. I don't mind talking about alcoholism, obviously. I'm sitting here talking about it for how long, but I don't want to talk about it with a group of people 4 days a week. It just doesn't work for me. Um, but I do need to center and bring my mind to focus on me and what I want to accomplish with myself several times a week. And that's what yoga does for me. It's not religious for me. I don't pray to anybody or anything. I just make yoga about exercise and about focusing on time for me. And when I do yoga, I think about, I just think about the task at hand because it's hard. And I think about, like, I usually try to think of one positive thought to keep in mind the whole time I'm doing it for the hour. And that's sort of what really works for me. So I think everyone needs to find a thing that works for them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a meeting. That's just my personal opinion. That's not, like,
Yeah,
I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. That's just what I've found.
that's excellent
So,
advice. Thank you. I found from my therapist kind of something was a little parallel to that in terms of getting help initially. Was and this was a separate issue, but it was just with when I was speaking to my therapist about trying to get help with just it was like tax forms that were stressful for me to process because they came from older years when I was a Jehovah's Witness and I was ignoring the problem. I would sit at my computer and I couldn't even Google who to call to get help, to get an accountant. And her advice was, well, why don't you ask a loved one and say, can you please help me Google this? and just that got me over that little hump. And and she recommended, that for, she's like, for anything that you're nervous or have apprehension about. And that was hugely helpful, just a kind of a big break for me. So if somebody is not sure where to get a therapist and it just feels daunting to even, scary to even Google it, asking someone, a loved one, a friend, somebody you trust who's not indoctrinated, is it was a step that helped me out a great deal.
The other thing I'll say is, as ex witnesses, remember to be open to new ideas and other things, because we were so taught to stay in this little narrow path, as they called it, the afterlife. But we were so, convinced to stay on this little narrow road and not look outside of it, that there's, you know, there's so many things that could be interesting and helpful to you that you would have never thought to do or try because they were not, Jehovah's Witness friendly. I never did yoga because I was sure the demons were going to get me. I've never seen a demon in the yoga studio.
Okay.
Um, and no one has chanted when I've been there. We're just on exercise. No one's levitating. And I mean, and if you don't want to do yoga, don't do it. But I mean, like, there's so many things that Jehovah's Witnesses put a stigma to that, you could go try. And if you don't like it, don't do it again. Like, that's all there is to it, So
Right.
I joined this yoga studio down the street. It's so nice. And the interesting thing is that there's a number of women that all go to this yoga studio, and there's a coffee shop right next door. And some of the women were like, "Hey, do you want to get a coffee?" Now, I would have, of course, as a witness, been like, "Oh, I can't associate with these worldly people." And that honestly was what went through my head at first, because I still have to get the indoctrination sometimes out of my head. And I was like, "Oh, sure." And they were all a little older than me. They were in their 60s. And the one woman had just lost her husband. He had just, they were on vacation. He died on vacation. It's terrible. It's
Oof.
a horrible story. But yeah, I know. But anyways, she's really trying. She's really trying to push herself through. And ended up being four of us. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. We all had very interesting stories. And we ended up sharing, and it was like a therapy session. It was so interesting. We all exchanged phone numbers. I never would have expected this, but if I hadn't gone to the yoga class, I would have never met these women. And now we meet every other Saturday, go to yoga, get a coffee, and talk for an hour. It's fantastic. So if
Yeah,
you
those
don't,
unexpected connections.
right, and if you don't open yourself up and you just stay closed off because you're so afraid of the world, and you're so afraid of these things in the world, you know, try stuff. And again, if you don't like it, just don't do it again. There's nothing wrong with just trying something and then you find out, oh, this isn't for me. That's all it comes down to. The Jehovah's Witnesses, or the governing body, makes everything so scary and ridiculous, and it doesn't need to be.
Worldly people are the
Well,
best.
I think I think those are like the perfect summary words for this whole episode. Don't don't let the GB dictate with fear the things that could
Yeah.
potentially be helpful to you
Right.
in your individual journey. So we're so proud of you. We're so excited for you. 1 year is amazing, and
Yeah, I'm
we're
almost
just so,
there. I got like a month and a half and I'll be there.
you got it, girl.
I really admire
And we're
that.
again just so honored that you came to us to share this story. And I feel 100% confident, and I'm sure Jason does as well, that there are people out there listening or watching that are going to benefit from hearing what you had to say and your viewpoints on all these matters. I think that's amazing.
I can't recommend your channel
Thank
enough
you.
to people who are having, anybody really, but this, I've gone back and watched a lot of your videos, and I remember there's points where you come out with a new video and you've said, I have to come clean about a previous video. I wasn't using then, or during the video I wasn't drunk, but I had been using before that. And there is just this absolutely brilliant raw honesty to your channel, and to you, and that's, I think that's just so helpful, so many people. So I cannot recommend Just June's channel, Deanna's channel, enough. And we're gonna, of course, link it here. And yeah, it's hugely beneficial. Definitely go there and subscribe.
Oh, thank you. And I got to say, it's not always easy to be honest, because just because I was honest, it doesn't mean that I didn't hurt people along the way, and I have to deal with that. And it's not always easy, but it's much better to be here now, even though I have regrets and even though I know I caused, some problems along the way and hurt people. I'd I'd rather be getting healthy, moving forward, and I can't dwell on all the things. I can say I'm sorry to people and try to move forward, but I'm so much happier being healthy and sober again, and it's worth the effort to do. So if you are struggling, I have a email, justjune1973 at Gmail. Please email me if you need someone to talk to. I'm absolutely will be there. I've talked to many people through my email and have tried to help as many as I can, because I know it can be a lonely place when you are just drinking by yourself.
Grew up in shadows, now I'm free. Dysfunction behind me, hope inside. New family found, safe and sound. Past was dark,